We're talking about the electorates in the success of every election. They play a major role. Now, they determine where the votes swing to, they hold the ace, and are the structures politicians take pride in. And the majority of the issues facing Nigeria today are those felt by the electorates across states, in every Nigerian home, and even those who live in the diaspora. Now, what are these issues electorates are talking about and even taking into perspective? That'll be our conversation today on The Square. Welcome to VSA. I'm Sulaiman. Well, another general election will be here in 2023, and it will come exactly 3 decades since a major point in Nigeria's democratic story. And the build-up is similar in its issues and problems, yet very different in expectations and the men on the ballot. Now, some old, others new. The faces aiming to lead Nigeria are known elements, and the issues age-long, teething, and huge. Now, the major parties have the major candidates, but the strength of the Nigerian voter is still considered important to the determination of who becomes what in the polity. Now, from the economy and health sector to education, there's a struggle for human capital development and a government with the capacity and capability to deliver. And, these are some of the key things Nigerians are looking out for. Joining me to unpack this today is Kunle Lawal. He's the Executive Director, Electoral College, Nigeria. And of course, Segun, Sopitan, a Public Affairs Analyst, joins me live in the studios. Well, Segun, good to see you, and thanks for making it all the way live to The Square.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, I quite understand that, there's a big traffic, unprecedented traffic in Lagos today, making it almost impossible for Kunle to be here live, so he's going to join us via Zoom. But again, let's start talking about some of the key things leading up to this election. People have started talking, and, the young people are also very important in this coming elections. For the first time in the history of Nigeria, we're getting to see some kind of renewed agitation and, of course, enlightenment. So, but again, let's start talking about the issues. Do you think anything has changed since 1999 till date in terms of the agitations and aspirations of Nigerians?
Yeah, I mean, a lot has changed. A lot has changed. I think that we have a crop of Nigerians who have lived through the democratic experience. If we can call, the Nigerian experience a democracy in the real sense of it, that's a completely different conversation. But they've seen quite a bit. So a person that was born in 1999 is 23 now, which means that by the last election, 2019, he was 20 or, thereabouts. So we have a crop of Nigerians now who have lived their entire lives through a democracy. And, that's saying a lot. For some of us, for our generation, we lived through the military era, the various coups, we experienced them. It's a completely different mindset. So for the people that we have now who are trooping out to go and register and all that, I think that the key change, the key difference is that unlike in the past where we either had transitions from one military administration to another, or even in our democracies, we've never had a transition from one party to a different party. We've had that experience recently, and people have seen it. And I think that has now taught quite a number of Nigerians a very, very bitter lesson, if you like, which is that the political class is the political class.
The political class is the political class.
There is no difference, so they're friends, they're one monolithic block. Whatever party they claim to be on, as we know, there are no ideological divides in the Nigerian political system. PDP, APC, so which one of them is, say, a liberal democratic party, which one is conservative, and all that. They don't exist. Those ideologies don't really exist in the purest form of them. They are just a monolithic block. Those parties are vehicles to access power and nothing more. And power for what purpose? Many would argue for personal interests, for personal aggrandizement, for pursuit of the interest of a certain select few. Some will call them the oligarchy. Nigerians have now come to see that as a result of the things that have happened since 1999 till date. So, and I think that perhaps that's what's behind what we're beginning to see, in this last 6 months or thereabouts. So a lot has changed.
I'm happy. Sorry for butting there. You said something about democratic experience. A lot, quite, yes. Let me bring in this perspective. If you look at 1993, a child born in 1993, I'm taking my mind back to June 12, 1993. That Nigerian should be in his 30s by now. And of course, some of the key things, if you also remember some of the, slogans and jingles of the SDP and even the NRC, specifically the SDP at that point in time, talking about water, talking about light, talking about food. But some would say it's still the same demand, it's still the same agitation. It doesn't look as if, well, anything has changed.
Yep. It looks as if we're stuck in a time loop as a country. It's almost as if we keep repeating the same cycles over and over again. And the more things appear to change, the more they remain the same. And we have to start asking ourselves, why? I've been having this conversation to a large extent amongst my circles, and I keep asking people, why? Why is it that the jingles that MQ Abiola ran on in 1993, like you said.
I was actually talking about that jingle.
Yeah. I mean, no light, no water, no good road, hospital, that I remember that song vividly, It's exactly the same, no difference. Power supply, as at last month, on the national, in fact, the national grid started collapsing several times a week because, so when you now dug into the why, you discover that it was because power supply was far below the capacity of the grid. So the grid would collapse consistently because at a point, we're generating less than 100 megawatts. 100, So we have a capacity of about 7,000 now. In fact, generation capacity of around 9,000. Transmission capacity of about 7,000. Of all of that, we can only distribute 5,000. But from that 5,000, we went as low as less than 100. So, it's mind-boggling that in 2022, in a world where the world is now talking about solar, wind, so many options. In terms of the energy mix, Nigeria went as low as less than 100 megawatts. And we've been saying these things for as long as I can remember. I remember growing up, to shouts of up NEPA. I'm in my 50s. It's sad, So yes, you're absolutely right. It's like we're stuck in a time loop. The issues that we debated in 1993, in fact, the issues that we debated in 1983 and in 1979 elections are practically the same. It's high poverty incidents.
And Segun, these players are still very much there. Now, that brings to mind the, young Nigerians. And some have argued that young Nigerians don't have the staying power. Recall what happened in 2019 with a lot of young Nigerians who actually threw their hearts in the ring. And at the moment some of them were not successful, they went back. Now we've seen some faces, names that are still there from the 70s, from the 60s, 70s, till this moment they are there. So now with what we've seen with young Nigerians, especially in social media and on social media and while also making an incursion into mainstream politics, is it safe to say the awareness is changing? The younger Nigerians are getting more aware, more enlightened as to what politics and governance is about.
Yeah. A number of things have happened in the last 6-7 years. I think the first thing that was a defining moment in our history was the emergence of President Muhammad Buhari in 2015. Because I think, you know, for me, as I've witnessed so many elections, I voted as soon as I was old enough to vote. I've always voted. I've never missed one election. So I speak from experience. I can't remember any other election where, maybe perhaps 1979, where it was Awolowo versus Shagari, you know, and all of that. And even that, I don't think can compare to what happened in 2015 with the emergence of President Muhammad Buhari and the groundswell of hope, the groundswell of emotions, you know, like for the first time in a long time, people thought, oh, maybe there's a chance. Oh, this guy is going to come, he's going to kill corruption, you know, and all of that. And then he emerged, and here we are, 7 years later. I think that was a major point, and I think that opened the eyes of a lot of people to some of the issues that, the real issues that we're contending with as a country. That's one. And then, NSAS, you know, you can't have this conversation without looking at the events that led up to, you know, the October agitations, the NSAS agitations 2020, and even before then, you know, so before then, there's been this restiveness amongst Nigerian youth, wanting to express themselves, wanting to be heard, you know, their creative energy, their, you know, their intellectual prowess and all of that being put on display. Thank God for social media, you know. People talk about things like Big Brother and look at them as negatives, but if you look at it, you find that through those types of platforms, the Nigerian youth and the average Nigerian found a channel to express themselves and show the world what they could do and how they feel about a lot of issues, you know. So, and then all of that led up to NSAS. And then 2020 happened. October 2020 happened, and you know, all those lives were lost and what have you. And I think that the series of events leading up to that created a new consciousness and a new awareness, not just in the Nigerian youth. Yes, it was the youth that led that, but that event reverberated around the whole world. It wasn't just a Nigerian thing. And I think it changed the perspective of Nigerians. For the first time, people were now saying, hey, wait a minute, if we could have done this, how can we form a political party? And they actually did. They actually did, you know. So, and I think that it's those events that has now led us to this point where, I mean, look at the numbers in terms of the registrations, PVC registration, just in the last 3 or 4 months.
Let me quickly bring in Kunle Lawal. Kunle Lawal, thanks for your time, and thanks for joining us over Zoom quickly here. And, you know, we're talking about the awareness. You're the director of the Electoral College Nigeria. Tell us more about what you and your team have been able to, you know, glean by looking at happenings in Nigeria. Do we now have a more aware, more enlightened young Nigerians who are about to change the course of voting and election in Nigeria? I think you have to unmute yourself, Kunle.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much. And
I can hear you now.
As usual. I would like to say this. If there's anything the Electoral College Nigeria has noticed, excuse me, if there's anything we've noticed, is that there's this surge in wanting to participate in elections. And we understand that this might have occurred based on what happened as regards the delegates issues within the primaries across political parties, like what you saw in the APC and the PDP. But I think even the PDP was kind of a little smoother if you look at maybe parties like the ADC. And this has been able to drive quite a concern in political participation, which ramped up the numbers you're seeing in registration of PVCs. Most people are really scared that with the current crop of maybe some candidates, they are wondering whether there's a chance for them to live in Nigeria. But the Electoral College is mostly concerned, as our job is always with political literacy. We are most concerned with the surge of wanting to pick candidates from the 16 presidential candidates that we have, and the problem we've always looked at is, can these choices be made by people who actually understand the political terrain? And that for us has been an underlying problem. Has there been a surge? Yes, there is, especially within Eastern Nigeria and Southwestern Nigeria. You cannot take this that people are, of course, wanting to participate more and wanting to be part of a process which they feel they've been robbed of being part of. But I still look at it and say, okay, with the current PVC registrations, let's say give or take, we have close to 90 million registered voters presently in Nigeria. But I think what's most key and what might be paramount in deciding is how these people will vote. We had 28 million people participating.
Now, just before, Kunle, let me jump in here. Just before we talk about how they will vote, help us make sense of this. In Nigeria, that a lot of people have also are complaining that there is a lack of agency that should enlighten the people. Time was when you had agencies that will enlighten, educate the people. So who's responsible for this groundswell, on enlightenment?
Well, the onus of enlightenment actually falls on the National Orientation Agency, partly on the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC. But I would say the INEC is overswamped with enough responsibilities, which is new PVC registrations, which is keeping up with online and offline, and presently offline. But it also is preparing for elections in Osun State and a lot of other things, which puts them in a quagmire a bit with trying to educate. Now, as for the NOA, which has representation in 774 local governments, I think the NOA has performed far on the par. You see, it is one to be given the task to educate. Then the second is knowing what exactly to educate the people on. So if the NOA itself is not qualified enough to educate the people, the onus and the weight has been thrown on the Electoral College Nigeria and a few other CSOs who are actually in the business of educating the electorate. Now, educating the electorate is not telling people to go and jump and get their PVCs. There's more to participation in an election, in a democracy, than it is telling people to jump and get their PVCs. The Electoral College has been concerned with telling people how manifestos should look, how a good manifesto should look. We've been concerned with, post-election education. We've also been concerned with differentiating between legislative and executive positions so people can make the right choices. Now, these are jobs which are tasked and mandated to the NOA, but the NOA, of course, I don't know for what particular reason, has not stepped up to the game. The Electoral College, of course, without the funding of massive funding that the NOA has quite a task on its shoulders.
I'll come back to you, Kunle. Let's come back to Segun, and I think I also want Kunle to weigh in on this. The slogan, go get your PVC. Is that enough?
It's a start because participation in the elections, regardless of whatever decisions that people eventually make, whether those decisions are even well informed or not, participation itself is critical because it's when you participate that you learn by doing. One of the problems that we have had since 1999 at least, is that participation has continued to reduce. Voter apathy has been really, really bad. The 2019 elections, if I am not mistaken, I think participation was somewhere around 33% of total registered voters came out to vote. So the participation issue is a critical one because the more people you can bring into the basket, into the decision-making basket, then hopefully, just by the laws of probability, then the quality of the decision hopefully will become better because you have more people, and you hope that you would have a wider percentage of both the good, the bad, and the ugly coming in to make those decisions. So participation is important. But having said that, clearly, the Nigerian electorate, and it's sad to say, but the Nigerian electorate is poorly educated, poorly enlightened. And this is not limited to an illiteracy or literacy level issue. So you find that even when you interact with people who are educated, who are exposed, widely traveled, there appears to be a certain level of shallowness in how we relate with the national question, in how we look at the problems that are confronting us, and how we base our analysis, for example, on evidence, looking at what has happened in the past and trying to correlate that with what's happening in the present and trying to use that to determine the decisions you are making, the electoral decisions you are making. You don't see that quality, you don't see that rigor in the way we think. So maybe you might want to even go take that conversation back to our educational system, because, you know, in the Nigerian curriculum, for example, there's nothing like critical thinking being taught in schools. So you find, you know, educated people, BSc holders, master's degrees holders, they don't know how to think. Thinking can be learnt. So, you know, so that's a problem in itself. I agree with Mr. Lawal. We absolutely have a need for massive enlightenment. The National Orientation Agency has been a massive disappointment. You know, I had said in the run-up to 2015 and after that one of the biggest problems that this country needs to tackle is our national mindset, the national thinking and culture and all that. And, you know, the only agency that can do that, that has the wherewithal, the spread, you know, and the resources to do that is the National Orientation Agency. Anybody that is old enough will remember, you know, those days when they used to do jingles, you know, Nigeria, make Nigeria great, love your country, Andrew, don't check out, all those things. Where are those things now? You know, so there's that, there's a failure of that. And then, just like you said, civil society is overwhelmed. We are underfunded, under-resourced, you know, so you can only do your bit, but that bit is nowhere near enough. So then you take that conversation down to the grassroots, you know, at the levels where literacy levels are really low, and then, you know, it's even a bigger task, because then you have to find a way to conceptualize, to reduce those concepts that you're trying to talk about to the simplest forms so that people can understand them. And, you know, that takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of energy and time. You know, so, but it's a good thing that we're seeing the swell of participation. I think it's a very, very good step forward.
Okay, let's come back to you, Kunle. Kunle, you know, listening to Segun, one key thing here that really comes to mind, looking at the Enlightenment, is that election that has already gone down. By the way, for those watching outside Nigeria, PVC is a person of the voter card that the voter would need here to vote. Now, quickly here, there's been an election in southwest of Nigeria, a state election, Ekiti election. And what do you think happened? Because one would have thought that the Enlightenment already started. People would have known that, well, you don't sell your vote, it can't be bought, and the risk inherent in that. You know, take us through what went down in Ekiti State as the nation prepares for another state election in Osun.
So, of course, the Ekiti election was kind of, I would say, more like almost any other election in Nigeria. There were incidences of vote buying. There were, of course, party thuggery to a particular level. And enlightenment and voting were not based on ideology. I would say what was a big plus for INEC there, which you must commend INEC, was, of course, the use of the electronic transmission of results, you know, which actually knocked off the collation centers. So results came in quicker, they were faster. But that, of course, solves the problem on one end. Now, the major problem, and where the Electoral College Nigeria is really focused in, is the education and the understanding of those who are participating in elections. Now, if you do not understand the jurisdictions of the executive, I feel as much as it's your right as a citizen to participate in an election, you cannot come up with anything tangible that would affect a democracy. Now, democracy in itself, of course, it demands an educated electorate. But what you find in most cases is that most people say they want a governor. A governor can come and tell you, and they don't understand manifestos. So someone who's running for office can come tell you, I'm going to put ACs on the road in Ekiti, and and you believe it because you don't understand the jurisdictions. There were people who thought, and there were videos even online, which people assumed that as long as someone is running for office and was going to get your vote, they deserve to put something in your fingers. And that was how Ekiti ran. I don't see a difference with Osun as it comes, and even headed towards 2023. The Nigerian project is long term. We must also understand that the magnitude of the problems which we are here, and I need to state here that I believe that in urban areas we are more electorally illiterate than they are in rural areas. At least they know what they're gunning for, they know what they want, but the urban areas happen to have people who just vote based on sentiment. They will tell you he's young and that's why I'm voting for him. And that's not a prerequisite. Good governance is not judged by age, tribe, religion, or gender. And we need to understand these things. And till we get these things right, it's a long walk to a true democracy.
Kunle, I quite appreciate that. I understand it's a long one. But again, looking at what's happening already, I started that same conversation here with Segun. How can they, because it's a big buzz on social media, how will the electorate's mindset, change the course of, this coming election in 2023? Because you just said that you don't see Osun election going any different from what we saw in Ekiti and past elections.
Yes, I don't see it going any different. You see, there's something about the Nigerian psyche, and we need to understand this. When it comes to gubernatorial, State House of Assembly, Federal House of Reps, Senate, and local government and councillor elections, Nigerians really don't care. When you want to see Nigerians really participate in elections, go for a presidential election. I don't know whether this is a military mindset or what has affected us since military, but we are mostly concerned about the president. I can categorically say this, that in 2023, there will be a difference in the way the president is being chosen. That is the only difference I'm looking forward to seeing, because that's what everybody talks about. And this is, of course, due to our political literacy levels, which makes us think that the president determines everything. But it is a great start, because I think that if we're able to alter the factors, we have a whole new set of players in the presidential elections. And this, of course, means nobody's a favorite exactly. So everybody's going to have to claw their claws through the ground for votes. And for the first time, thanks to the Electoral Act, we're having 8 months for them to prepare before an election. So I look forward to the presidential election, because for me, that's where we'll see the effective change in which CSOs and everybody has been working over the last few years.
I'll take a moment. We'll come back to you, Segun Lawal, and of course, Kunle. So I mean Segun and Kunle, I'm putting everything together. Apologies there. So we'll talk more about what may happen in the coming elections, and of course, how prepared you see the electoral umpire, and of course, tell us more about how poverty of the mind and of course the stomach, because recall that in Nigeria we had a new one introduced into the political lexicon, stomach infrastructure, how that can be taken out. That's when we return. Well, more than 10 million Nigerians have registered to vote in the 2023 elections, with a massive population of youth there for the taking. Now, the subtle endorsement of candidates is beginning to stroll in as major voices delivering goodwill messages with political undertones. Nigerians online and offline are pushing to make a difference in the country as the focus placed on the 2023 election heightens and has been widespread. Still with me on the show, Kunle Lawal and Segun Sopitan. And let's start with Segun. You know, poverty, stomach infrastructure. You know, we just talked about vote buying, and Kunle is concerned, and he said he doesn't think that that will abate looking at the coming elections. At what point do you think we can start to see a decrease in vote buying? Because it looks like it's an in thing. You enlighten people, you speak to them, you get to election, and it's the same thing. And those who have sold their ballots are still the same people who will come around and complain that they haven't actually got the good of governance.
Yep. Look, it's very simple. Human beings anywhere in the world actually are the same. We have the same red blood flowing in our veins, regardless of the color of our skin, and regardless of the temperature of the environment we live in. So you could be living in Finland, or you could be living in Nigeria, or you could be living in South Africa or Chile. The average human being looks out for himself first, personal survival, right? And then you move in the hierarchy of needs, you know, up the ladder. Why do I say this? The issues that we are confronted with and the issues that you've raised are driven primarily by two factors. On the one hand, if you don't want a particular behavior type or a behavior pattern, then you must provide adequate disincentive for that behavior pattern. So if you say vote buying is wrong and you don't want vote buying, then there must be consequences when they happen. So you must arrest the vote buyer and the vote seller because it's illegal. It's actually a crime. That doesn't happen. Therefore, it will continue because people do what they know they can get away with. If you put somebody in an enclosure and there's plenty of money there and there are no cameras and the person is left with just his conscience, his God, and the money, he'll steal. 9 out of 10 will probably steal. Because, except if you've just, built some sort of level of discipline in yourself, you probably will do the wrong thing if you know you will not be caught. So the consequence management process around our elections need to be improved. That's one. But the more fundamental issue is that, there's the poverty prevalence in any of these communities that we talk about, whether it's Osun, whether it's, the Ekiti, anywhere in Nigeria, even Lagos, poverty prevalence is rather high. We used to be the poverty capital of the world until recently, and we're still dragging with the two most populous countries in the world, China and India. So it's not a compliment that we are actually fighting people that have populations of 1 billion. We are contending with them in terms of the number of people living in poverty in Nigeria, where we have only a population of 200 million, right? So there is no way you would have that kind of poverty, and you have a political class that are looking for ways of compromising the system, that vote buying will not be a natural occurrence. It's going to happen, and you will not stop it, and it's not going to stop, I'm sorry. So you will have vote buying in Osun, you're going to have vote buying in 2023, and you're going to have vote buying in elections after that, until the general economic climate begins to improve, and until the people that are saddled with managing these elections and how they go and how people behave around them get their acts right. So that's not going away. Therefore, we need to then look above and beyond that as far as the quality of our elections are concerned. So now Osun is coming up. We've just had Ekiti. I think one of the things that I'd like to really say about these elections and the quality of elections, the issue of vote buying and all of that is kudos to INEC. And kudos to the National Assembly and the President for the new Electoral Act that has now made it a legal requirement or a legal provision to transmit election results electronically. This is critically important, and it's important that people understand this, that Nigerians understand this. So I speak with a lot of young Nigerians who are very apathetic about our elections. They don't care You know, in spite of the groundswell that we seem to be seeing, if you still run a random poll on the street about people that have their voter card, you still find that there's quite a disturbing number that will say, who PVC help? People are still saying that. Why? Because they tell you that votes don't count. They tell you that it's a waste of time, that why should I go queue in the sun and get beaten by the rain when I know it's going to be rigged? Now, what has happened with this recent development is rigging at polling unit level and even at collation center level has become very difficult, because now INEC will transmit results, you know, electronically to a central server, one. Two, those results get displayed on a site that is available to the public in real time. Almost, it's not real time, but you know, the time lag I've noticed is probably about 1 or 2 hours. You know, with the Ekiti elections, I personally tried it, and I discovered that you can actually, so they upload the results sheet from each polling unit onto that server, and anybody can go there and download it. What that means is that I can go to my polling unit, I can vote, and then I can take the results from the polling unit, write them down, and then go to the server to confirm that that's what's there. And I know that what I'm seeing on that server is what has gone into the overall collated results, which means the integrity of the elections have received a huge boost. This message must be passed across to Nigerians who are just disenchanted and apathetic and think that their votes don't count. They need to understand that things have changed, the game has changed. Go out there and vote. So hopefully we should see that reflecting in turnout levels, you know, with Osun and then with subsequent elections.
Let's bring in Kunle. Kunle, the Electoral College Nigeria and so many other, you know, NGOs are out there trying to enlighten the people, letting them understand that, look, wait a minute, vote buying is another style of rigging. Now, at what point or at what level do you think you can start to engage the people to make them understand that this doesn't help your cause by selling your vote? Because this is so important. Now, so we have agencies like the National Orientation Agency you spoke about earlier to talk to the electorates on the importance of such. Now, let's bring in others like the Electoral College Nigeria and so many other agencies and even the media. How can this be done and won over?
I feel first, as the fourth estate, the media has a lot of work to do. And this has been done, of course, trying to, you know, build up, you know, such conversations. But has it been enough? That is the question. So I think votes can only be bought when people do not understand the consequences of vote buying. People feel that the only dividends they can ever achieve from democracy is when they receive something from a politician before he returns in the next 4 years. Now, the job is now how to sell the idea that what he gives you preceding that election and goes away, he has to recoup from national funds and give back, which is taken away from development, which you should have on infrastructure. Now, this has been quite a sell. This has been quite a tough sell, because to get this message across largely, you're going to have to get people to understand what exactly democracy is. I'll give you an example. So most people talk about the PVC. The biggest sell of the PVC is that you can use it to vote. But the PVC actually has 2 uses, and no, second use is not identification. The second use is, of course, the ability to recall a serving or sitting legislator, be it in the State House of Assembly, Federal House of Rep, and Senate. This is a message not played too much. This is a message that we also do not understand in Nigeria. So we need to be able to collate this kind of messages and then set out a system. The Electoral College, of course, is working on a system of calculated messages preceding 2023. I think would start in August. And, you know, start to release, you know, graphical representation and, you know, animated presentations on how exactly vote buying could affect your infrastructure, your thought process, what else, whatever developments you could have had because you took about 4,000 naira on the day of elections. And people need to understand, first, I say something. Segun mentioned something. Our educational system, too, is there to be queried because it doesn't allow you understand what exactly. So I'll give an example. What exactly is a manifesto? The Electoral College has spent a lot of time educating pockets of people on what manifestos should look like, because you can't tell what a good manifesto is if you don't know what a manifesto is. And therein lies the problem. So we've had to be playing this kind of cards. I would say it's a holistic process, and we need to understand that a lot of us need to participate in this system, working together. That's the media, the CSOs, the concerned government agencies, and everybody must put together a program that carries Nigerians along and showcases the entire process within the election.
Well, in carrying Nigerians along, let me stay with you, Kunle, for a bit, and let's go back to the candidates. And for the first time in the history of major elections in Nigeria, we're getting to see presidential candidates not too sure of who their running mates are. How important is this in the choice to the eventual emergence of a candidate?
Let's look at the new Electoral Act. So business as usual preceding the Electoral Act of 2022 stipulated, of course, you won your presidential primary sometime in October, and then you could take your time till about December before you brought out who your running mate was. The new Electoral Act is definitely different and demands a shorter ratio and a shorter time. I would say for someone in the PDP, it was kind of easy. The candidate of the PDP was kind of easy because he's planned this quite a long time. I was surprised the APC candidate also didn't have, someone readily available, and this is because he must understand the political diversity of Nigeria, considering he's a southern Muslim and must pay attention to the north. I think with the jump of Peter Obi from the PDP into Labour Party now winning that primaries, he too has had quite a ball game in trying to pull a vice president. I'll first say the Electoral Act caught a lot of people unaware because it was released shortly before the games began. So it kind of shook everybody else. Now I'm sure everybody will understand that when you're getting into the game, you must already have thought of your running mate. So this is a test. This is a litmus test for the new Electoral Act 2022. But that's enough. That enough has been said. But let's look at it. This election is kind of delicate, and we must understand this. Last time we had an incumbent after serving 2 terms trying to hand over was 2007. That's quite some years from now. So give or take, I think it's not quite an easy process after an incumbent has served 8 years, and then you have a whole new bunch of chess players scuttling enough for the votes of Nigerians. It's quite a dicey game, and though what we're seeing is within the Electoral Act, I think by July 17, everybody must have clearly stated who exactly their vice presidential candidates are.
I'll still come back to you, Segun, so that, Kunle, so that you tell us more about what you think, because you did say earlier on that you're so interested in the presidential election, you have a sense of how it may go. So I'll come back to you so that if there are other things that the Electoral College Nigeria has been working on, we can start talking about the candidates. Now let's talk to you, Segun. Looking at the candidates for the first time, again, we've seen that the candidates are almost going out of what they call a 2-party race. Time was you always had a 2-horse race, but now we have more, heavyweights, so to speak, who have emerged in these political parties, notably Peter Obi, who is giving the Labour Party some form of prominence. How do you think this will play out?
Well, first of all, some people will still disagree with you. Some people will still tell you that it's still a 2-horse race between the 2 major parties, the APC and the PDP, and their respective candidates. And they will say this on the strength of the antecedents of these parties and the antecedents of the party where Mr. Peter Obi is, like the common mantra of structure. So in terms of the appeal and the popularity of the individuals, yes, we have three major candidates. But in terms of the race itself, I think, to be honest, you know, it's still a race between the APC and the PDP. We've got to be honest with ourselves. The Peter Obi movement and the people on that side of the divide would not like to hear that, but it's a truth that they must relate with and then perhaps try to address. It's a race between the APC and the PDP. Why? Those parties have the resources. They've got the structures. Our elections are flawed. We just spoke about vote buying. And in a country where poverty prevalence is as high as, you know, about 60% of the entire population, where you have over 100 million people living in abject, how do they call it, multidimensional poverty, vote buying is going to be a consideration, which means now just do the numbers. The number of people that voted in the recently concluded Ekiti election, I think, was about 700,000 or thereabouts, something like that. Let's presume, for example, that maybe 50% of those people got influenced with money. If you do the numbers and each person got 5,000, some got 10,000, you are talking in the multiples of billions of naira. And that's the kind of thing that's going to happen in 2023. Does the Labour Party and Mr. Peter Obi have those types of resources? Do they have the structures on ground in the 8,800 odd wards across the country, in the 176,000 odd polling units? You know, the answer at the moment is probably no. So the race is between those two candidates, APC, PDP, and their candidates. However, what Mr. Peter Obi has done is that he's thrown in the dark horse scenario, which we have not had, to the best of my knowledge, ever in our political history.
Well, Kunle, I think just recently I spoke with the PRP presidential candidate and talking about Kola Abiola, and he said to me that the whole talk about structures in political parties is hogwash and is in our minds. According to Kola Abiola, well, a whole lot will happen in 2023 because Nigerians will be voting, looking at the candidates and not the political parties. Kunle.
Well, I must agree with Mr. Kola Abiola on this. Having been someone who's run an election in 2019, it's clear for me to understand that the only meaning of structure in Nigeria means money. It's not that definition of what structure is than it is in politics. So I'm going to do a rundown on a recap on 4 presidential candidates, and this will be for NPP, which is Alhaji Kwankwaso, the APC, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, PDP, which is, of course, is Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, and then Labour Party of Peter Obi. So looking at Kwankwaso, stronghold, northwest Nigeria, will touch across Kano and Jigawa. Votes there will probably be majority won by him. There will be a tight fight across the north, splitting other votes within northern Nigeria. Let's look at whoever is his vice president will have to be somebody who comes from the south with very strong standing. Mr. Kwankwaso is flat out in the south. Looking at Alhaji Atiku Abubakar and Okowa. Okowa, of course, is a strong name in Delta. So you're looking at Delta, and then looking at Rivers State, held by Wike under PDP, of course, which will be strongholds for them. We can also say Udom of Akwa Ibom will be given out. So the South-South is taken out. Now, the Southeast will be taken partly by PDP. I don't see the APC doing well in the Southeast. Now, welcome Peter Obi of the Labour Party. And Peter Obi of the Labour Party, of course, will take quite a part of the Southeast. And now, why he's called a dark horse, his strength actually lies where everybody assumes they have strength. So I'm looking at Lagos being quite a confusion with the Labour Party coming into the game. Let's also understand that PDP, of course, has taken Oyo State, and most likely looks like it will take Osun State at this rate. That will be weakening the power of the APC candidates. And this will also come new to Peter Obi. So I don't see Peter Obi doing well in states that are not very metropolitan. So I see him taking a drag on Lagos. he might just be that dark horse that might pull out just about 25%, enough to be able to scale across board. But like we said, it's a dark horse. You can't really tell how it's going. But I love the emergence of new candidates that he's pulling out, and a lot of other systems.
Kunle, some say he's not the dark horse. Some say he's a spoiler.
I wouldn't say he's a spoiler. Now, anybody that is saying that is, of course, using the old game to predict this game. 2023 is very, very unpredictable. And anybody who hasn't figured that out is probably assuming a lot of overestimating or underestimating the people of Nigeria. Now, I look at 2023, like I gave you subsections with how the regions might play. The truth is, as it goes, I can tell you that a whirlwind in Katsina is enough to change the way maybe MPP or Labour Party or APC or PDP might do in those places. We have 8 months. 8 months is the longest time we have ever had preceding a presidential election. So for me, let the games begin. I'm looking into the Coliseum of Nigeria towards 2023.
And before I let both of you go, I'll put the same question to both of you, but let's start with you, Kunle. I've had Kasim Afegwa here, one-time PDP member who's just left the party owing to the outcome of the primaries. He did say here on VSA that he thinks that the coming election will see Nigeria go into a runoff. Kola Abiola thinks otherwise. So what do you think?
Well, like I said, it's hard seeing 25%, the required 25% across all regions in Nigeria by any of the presidential candidates. So I'm looking at probably a situation where two will be tied up, and then there might be a runoff after, and then further speaking, the final one. But like I said earlier, I don't think Nigerians will play the way they are supposed to play. Let's also remember that this is the first election that 50% of...
And let me quickly bring Segun here. Segun, what do you think? Do you see a runoff?
It's a distinct possibility because of the Peter Obi factor and the fact that, contrary to what a lot of people think, and I must say, disclosure, I'm close to that camp. And I can tell you that something is happening in the northern part of the country with regards to this gentleman, especially with the young populations there, right? So I think he is going to throw, you might call him a spoiler if you like, that's fine. I don't have any problem with that because, that's the point. That's what a dark horse does. It scatters, the permutations and all of that. And then, if the main contenders now don't take his threat or challenge seriously enough, he could upset the apple cart, so a runoff is a possibility, but in fact I think it's a distinct possibility. I think it probably will happen, but like Kunle said, nobody can predict the outcome of this election. Anything can happen, and it's good for our democracy. It's good for our country.
Well, it's a fine place for us to leave it, but all three of you have done, what Nigerians and the continent is looking out for: enlighten the people, educate the people, and as Kunle said, well, the media has a whole lot to play in this, and we'll keep it burning. And again, I'd like to thank you for being such nice company, Kunle Lawal, as always, and of course, Segun Sopitan for finding time to be live here on The Square. And of course, for those across the continent, keep your eyes on the election coming in Kenya. We'll be covering that for you here on The Square. I'm Sulaiman. Bye-bye.